would, just name and affiliation as you ask a question, and we'll have a couple players in here and probably a couple in the hallway as well. So we'll get started with Pat.
Awesome.
Pat,
Go ahead.
Eric Olson with the Associated Press. Just kind of wanted to see what your initial take was after last night with the Judge Wilkins' decision on the roster limits kind of being in flux now and the implementation. Is there a strategy now on your end to address that?
Yeah, the strategy will be to adjust and do business as it's being done. Decisions will be made whenever those rulings come down, and whenever they're set to go, we'll be set to go. So, really, not too much to add beyond that.
Maybe just for going into general stuff, was that decision a surprise to you guys, or just what was the staff's general?
I've only been here for like a month, and I'm not too surprised by anything that's gone on with this, just because it seems to change every day. And, like I said, we'll kind of adjust as we keep going, and whenever rules are final, we'll be ready to go.
Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Being that you've only been here a month, can you speak to the situation in college sports that you've walked into and what that's like for you to hit the ground in this time when everything seems to be in flux?
Yeah, I think, it's one of those things where I don't have a lot of experience in college football right now, but I could have been in the business for 15 years, and I'd probably be on the same plane that everybody else is, right? Because everything's changing and everything's adjusting. So to the point of, how have I adjusted to it? Everybody's adjusting to the same things. So it's really not a advantage or a disadvantage at this point.
Hey, Pat, what has been, Sean Callahan of Husker Online, what has been the biggest adjustment for you to watch high school tape and, deal with, 15, 16-year-olds versus 23, 24 grown men, what you spent the last several years dealing with?
Yeah. It's a good question. I've really been surprised, especially the guys we're watching here and the guys at Keith and Troy and that team has identified. They're really good football players. I've been surprised at how good and how developed those guys are at such a young age. A lot of guys on defense playing with their hands at like levels I wouldn't expect, right? Quarterbacks who know how to go through progressions, receivers who know how to run routes. I've been surprised more on the positive side of things than trying to adjust my eyes to watching a different type of football.
Max Olson, just kind of going off that question. Obviously, the DPPs and GMs in college are adjusting to cap and agents and contracts and all that stuff. For you, what have kind of felt like the big adjustments for you coming to the college level, or is that a little bit overstated in coming down?
Yeah, I don't know if it's overstated. It's just, like I've said before, like the rules are constantly changing, right? So we're kind of going to adjust. I've been fortunate to have been a couple different places, exposed to a lot of different things. We'll use some different mechanisms that we've used at those places at this level and try to, correlate to how this structure works. Like we've worked with the salary cap in the NFL. Salary cap here isn't really the same thing because there's different mechanisms you can use for moving money forward, incentivizing contracts. You really can't do that under this setup. So that'll be a change that I'll have to get used to. But
Guys, do you know how much money you're dealing with?
we don't. Yeah, I mean, we've talked internally, but we're not going to talk about that publicly. Yeah.
Why did you choose to come to Nebraska instead of continuing to work in the NFL?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I was in the NFL for 18 years. Was really fortunate to be with, great organizations with great people. And when you're working in the NFL, you kind of think, well, there's only 32 of these jobs if eventually you want to take the next step and apply what you've learned during the course of your career. Things have changed in college football. These opportunities have presented themselves now. And I just thought with Matt being here, my familiarity with him, it would be a good transition.
Why do you like him?
Why do I like Matt? It's a good question. We see things a lot of the same way as far as football, what it's about, what kind of players we want, the type of people we want to build the team around. We see things a lot of the same way. I had talked to a couple of different places during the course of last year, just kind of getting the feel for like what this is all about in college football now. And when I decided that it's going to be something I wanted to do, I decided it's only going to be with somebody that I know, just because there needs to be that alignment. Because none of this works at any level if there's not alignment between what the head coach wants and what we give him.
You mentioned the Patriot way of evaluation and evaluating.
Yeah.
I understand it's a complex thing and probably not something that, you can give a dissertation on right here, but like in a boiled down kind of answer, like how do you describe that if someone doesn't really know what that means?
Find good football players. Like that's pretty much the secret sauce is finding good football players. But we, in New England and, I was fortunate to work in Philadelphia also with Howie Roseman, who had a great influence on me. So we're going to take some things from New England, from Philadelphia, and also what they've done here because they've had a lot of success recruiting and building a team here that you look out there on the field right now, it's a pretty good roster. It's a pretty solid roster. But as far as like the Patriot way goes, it's about finding tough, smart, dependable players that can consistently compete to win championships and perform in pressure situations. So those are the guys that we're looking for.
Hey, Pat, when you build recruiting classes, how similar is it with high school players to like building a draft class where you have a lot of maybe first, second, like higher slotted guys versus maybe kind of undrafted free agent, like entry level signees?
Yeah, I think that's something I'm kind of adjusting to as far as building out like a high school recruiting board. But to your point, like it's finding guys that fit in the slots, and it goes back to his question about the Patriot scouting method. It's filling roles, like identifying what guys do and what they're capable of becoming eventually, but what can they do for us right now and what will they do in the future? Like that's kind of what we're looking to do. So to your point, like early on guys and late round draft pick guys, undrafted free agents, like you need all of those players to win. So we need to identify the best ones at each different level and see what we can do with them.
You don't always hear that. People, guys in your shoes say, we look for players who can play in pressure situations. How do you determine that? I mean, I know there's various ways. Why is that so important?
Yeah, I think that's when games are won and lost, right? Like you can look at games around the country every week, college and in the NFL, and most of them are decided in like a 5-play stretch. Where a decision has to be made and you have to perform at high speeds and make decisions at a high level. So it's finding the guys who have had experience doing that, whether it's in high school or whether it's guys from the portal. You can see it on tape, the different people you talk to, different touch points that you gather along the way to see if they're capable of doing that.
Your first year in Carolina with Matt, there was a lot of change with the changing COVID rules and all of that. Did that experience help shape you for like what's going on right now with not knowing?
That's a great question. I thought about that the other day, actually. Like, yes, to answer your question. And a lot of it is we are constantly getting new rules, right, during the COVID situation. And now we're kind of constantly getting new guidelines, and we think it's going to go this way. We feel it's going to go this way. This is what we think might happen. So yeah, like that, it was a great experience to learn and know, because that was my first time being on an executive level was that year. And I kind of felt like it leveled everybody else out because we were dealing with the same new rules. Yep.
Matt said you're the one that has the conversations with players about money without getting into the specifics of dollars. How have those conversations gone, and like how is it maybe different to talk to a 19-year-old versus a 31-year-old?
Yeah, I think one thing I've said to a couple different guys and their parents is those discussions can get pretty personal. I'm a father of 2 boys. They're not ready to take NIL deals or anything like that yet. They're 8 and 5. But it's one of those things where when you hear where somebody values your child and it doesn't match up with what your opinion of them is, there can be some feelings. So it's kind of trying to thread that needle of, being considerate to people's emotions and feelings about how much they're valued, where we see them falling on the roster as far as role and what we're going to ask of them, and just trying to balance that out.
In your long experience, I'm going to use the phrase bedside manner in the way that you talk about these things, like the tone and the language you use, if you had to cultivate that over time and figure out best approaches and best practices with talking to athletes?
I found the best practice is to be as honest as possible and tell people exactly where they stand so nothing's a surprise. There's probably nothing harder than cutting a player. And we'll see what happens with the 105. I tell people all the time, like, it's really hard to cut a guy because, like, that kid and that man was the best high school football player that ever came out of his high school, or he's reached this level and you're telling him it's over and something they prepared their whole life for. So it's a difficult situation. Like you said, the bedside manner has to be there to kind of feel it out.
Luke Mullen from the Lincoln Journal-Star. When it comes to determining a player's market value, how difficult is that when you maybe don't have the data on what a different
That's exactly. Yeah, you don't have the data. It's pretty difficult. We can sit here and say like, oh, NFL salary cap's this. We have this to work with. Let's try to make a direct correlation to it. But it doesn't always work out that way because the ask is going to be always higher and sometimes exponentially higher than what you're valuing that person at their position and role. So it's trying to find the right balance for if we're going to pay higher here, it's going to come away from somewhere else. So it is a difficult process, and hopefully it's something we get more guidance on in the future because that makes everything easier for all parties to understand of what they can expect to get, and also what we need to budget out to build the team that we want to build.
Also, there's transparency as to when contracts are expiring.
Yeah.
So in this time of year, when 1,000 guys pop up and it's unpredictable, how is navigating that?
It's been different because I hear a lot of times people talk about it being free agency, and it's really not free agency as I know it in the NFL with unrestricted guys. You know when their contract's up, you know who's available and when, and you can kind of plan out over the course of a couple months how you're going to spend your resources. Here, guys just become available, and you have to pivot right away. It's pretty similar, in my opinion, to like preseason in the NFL, where like you have to watch the guys on their teams throughout 3 weeks, and then on one day they cut down from 90 to 53, and you have to be ready to pivot to whoever becomes available. So I think it's probably on us to probably do a better job and a better process of knowing who might be available and just having like a baseline on everybody so we can pivot as fast as possible.
Clayton Collier, First Alert 6. Going back to what you were just talking about in terms of a little bit of an undefined market, are there positions that are, say, more defined in terms of value than others, like a quarterback versus a lineman or something like that?
Yeah, I think right now like quarterback's probably the most established market. You kind of know where everybody falls based on like, again, you don't know who's the highest paid, but you kind of have a general idea of, based on guys who are available and what we are paying at different positions, how you would allocate those resources.
Patriots were obviously the best of both worlds. You were able to build a really good roster around a quarterback you got in the 6th round and was a Hall of Famer. Can you make that portable to college, or is the quarterback piece always going to just be you're going to be pursuing somebody that isn't somebody you find at the bottom of the draft?
Yeah, I think regardless of where someone gets drafted, their talent's going to come to the surface. So regardless of how we acquire a player, if they're good enough to be the one that we build around, then we'll do it and try to fill in around them accordingly. I think to your point, can you do it without a quarterback? No. So like you're always going to be chasing and trying to find that quarterback.
With the responsibilities associated with acquisition, retention, and finance, it seems like a lot of work.
Yeah.
How comfortable are you right now with the staff that you have working for you in those 3 areas, and what part of the process are you in right now in like having those jobs divided up?
Yeah. I think we're going to eventually at some point, we posted a couple of jobs the other day just for recruiting coordinator jobs, which will be like scouts, for lack of a better term. So we want to build that out just to get the manpower up in order to churn out as much information as we can on the players that could be available in high school and in the portal. As far as your other departments with finance and those sort of things, like there's great resources here, and they've done a great job. Scholarship folks, legal, 1890, just kind of getting me caught up to speed with how all that works and how things are structured.
Back to the quarterback thing for a second. Is that so? Is that a situation where like you're going to have to be looking all the time because you only get them for 4 years? Or 5
Yeah, no
years.
doubt. I think even in the NFL, like you're constantly looking to make sure you're good at quarterback because you're good until you aren't, right? So it's the most important position in sports.
Scouts isn't a term we hear very often in college. What's that picture look like?
Just evaluating tape, watching tape, identifying strengths, weaknesses, and applying a grade to what you think that player's role can eventually be for our team.
What's your vision for how many?
Those are discussions we're having. I would like as many as possible. just because I think the more people you have around and the more information that we can funnel up to the decision makers, the better off we'll be.
12, 7.
We're going through that.
Hey, Pat, when you got here, how blown away were you by just the complexity of NIL with how guys were getting paid, whether it was car deals, housing deals,
Yeah.
other things that were like tied to how the compensation was put together?
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's awesome for them. I'm blown away by the fact oh man, they get this now. I don't think it blew me away by how things were structured and where this money's from here and this is counting for this. Like that, to me, those are kind of, for lack of a better term, like incentives in an NFL contract. You kind of try to make things work a certain way. Just different mechanisms you can use for a contract.
You mentioned a solid roster relative to what? Like, why do you think it's a solid roster compared to?
I think just watching them for the last 14 practices and how they've competed. In my experience going on the road as an area scout and watching a bunch of college football, just being exposed to different teams. And you kind of go out there as a scout and you're really looking at, the guys that you're evaluating and as a big picture, what does this program look like and how hard do they work? Because you want to be able to take that back to know that somebody can work in your system, right? So just evaluating not only the talent, but also the effort, the grind, the grit, the toughness of this team has been really impressive.
Scout games here at Memorial Stadium.
I came to one game here. It was Oklahoma State, Nebraska. I think it was when Sue was coming out. And so I had planned it early on because it was Sue and Des Bryant, and I wanted to be able to see both those guys.
What's Keith Williams do for you? Rhule mentioned him, and I think you mentioned him. What all are you asking of him and his role?
Yeah, Keith does a great job. Keith, Troy, Avery, Devin, and T. Rich do a great job of keeping everything going while I'm getting caught up to speed on especially the high school recruiting, knowing where guys are, who we need to talk to, the different touch points of getting information about players. He's got a great, institutional knowledge of this place just because of his experience here, and that's been a really great resource for me.
Pat, do you have friends in the pro ranks who are wanting to make this transition, wanting to go to college, or they wanted to see how it kind of goes here?
Yeah, they're probably waiting to see if I screw it up. I think it's just one of those things. It's new for everybody, so it's kind of wait and see for if that's going to be something they're going to be interested in.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.